We're living in amazing times. Medical technologies have seen a huge leap in mankind's ability to improve and prolong our lives. Joint replacements, organ transplants, they're commonplace. We've made huge leaps in the area of cancer research. IVF has allowed millions of previously infertile women to achieve a pregnancy. A couple can have a baby with their own eggs and sperm, with donated eggs, and even with a donated uterus. A woman can have a baby on her own. A gay couple can have a baby together. There have continued to be developments in contraception so that couples can choose when and if they have children. And if contraception fails, termination of a pregnancy is becoming more and more accessible. I'm not a scientist, but I work as a general practitioner, and I find myself helping and advising ordinary people every day who are making decisions about the uptake of these technologies. And I'm finding more and more that people don't even think about the morality or ethics behind these treatments. Because we live in a world where the rights of the individual are number one, and where the end always justifies the means. But does it? Just because we have the technology to do something, is it always ethically right to do so? We've already seen that as Christians, we may need to reconsider some of the prevailing attitudes of society. We need to work hard at understanding God's view on how we should live and treat others. And that extends to the world of medicine as well. And I'm going to suggest that this won't be easy. And it won't be easy for several reasons. Firstly, medical ethics deals with difficult stuff. Literally life and death. And the issues can be very personal and very painful for the people involved. We need to remember that and to temper our attitudes with compassion. Secondly, we may find ourselves walking out of step with the world. We might find our views on things like abortion, contraception, and the rights of embryos very unpopular. Thirdly, there is not always a clear biblical position on many medical interventions. This side of heaven, our understanding of the issues involved and God's view on them will always be imperfect. We have a responsibility to work hard at trying to understand the science and also the biblical perspective. But we also need to remember humility and to listen to others well. Obviously, this is a huge area. I thought I might just briefly try and discuss a few of the technologies available to us today. I'll discuss the medical and ethical issues involved and then try to give you a brief, very brief biblical framework to try and start thinking about them. There's a myriad of tests performed on a woman and her baby in early pregnancy. But what many women don't realise is that these tests have two very different purposes. The first is to ensure that mother and baby have maximised health. Blood tests, ultrasound dating scans are done so that we can provide any supplements, medications or monitoring that's needed to ensure the health of mother and baby. However, nowadays there are also routinely performed tests that are called first trimester screening. These are also blood tests and ultrasound tests done about the 10 to 13 week stage of a pregnancy. But their purpose is not just to ensure the health of mother and baby, although that is certainly part of it. The main purpose of these tests is to see if the developing baby has a severe developmental or genetic abnormality, and this is so that the mother can elect to terminate that pregnancy if she so chooses. It's commonplace and legal to terminate a pregnancy up to 20 weeks gestation for medical reasons. There was a time when we had to counsel women to ask if they wanted to proceed with these tests. Now, even though I inform women of the purpose of first trimester screening, it is extremely rare that anyone would waive them. So let's consider some of the biblical perspectives. Firstly, we know from the Psalms and Jesus' teaching that all life has value to God and that a baby is loved from the time he or she is made in the womb. We know that we are encouraged as God's chosen people to love sacrificially, even being prepared to give up our own lives for others, as Jesus did. Our own comfort, health, or financial situation is not number one. We know that God values all people, even those with a disability. Finally, we know from Romans that God can work all things for good for those who love him. So in the light of these truths, I would like to suggest that choosing not to have these tests because you would never consider terminating a pregnancy under any circumstances may be the correct biblical response. Some women, however, may have thought about the implications of these tests and still elect to proceed, because even if they would never consider termination, they would like to have all information available to better manage the pregnancy and the neonatal care. And this is a reasonable response, but you would need to be courageous to take this stance. Not just because of the anxiety it could bring you for the rest of your pregnancy, but because of the attitudes of medical people around you. I've seen women who carry a baby to full term with probable Down syndrome vilified by medical staff, friends and family, considered irresponsible for bringing a baby with a defect into the world. Of course, some of us here today may have been in this position. You may have gone ahead with these tests, and you may even have been moved to end your baby's life. And I'm certainly not going to stand in judgment. As I've said, there are so many personal issues here that others may never know. We all need to make our own decisions before our gracious God. But I think the main thing is that we as Christian women need to take the time to consider, think, and pray over issues like these before we just go along with what everyone in the world is doing. The state government will consider legalising voluntary assisted dying later this year. So end-of-life care is very topical. Voluntary assisted dying encompasses euthanasia, where a doctor intentionally ends the life of a person, usually with drugs, at their request. It also includes physician-assisted suicide, where the doctor is not present but may supply the drugs or means for a patient to commit suicide themselves. It does not include palliative care, where symptoms are controlled at end of life, or withdrawal of treatment, where drugs or life support are withdrawn to allow death to take its natural course. In our society, we are afraid of death, and the process of dying holds great terror for most people. There's an increasingly common belief that voluntary assisted dying provides the only compassionate way out of the suffering of dying. But should we, as Christians, share that view? Let's think about some of the biblical perspectives. We know from countless passages that Christians should have compassion for others and work to relieve suffering wherever we can. So good quality palliative care, which involves management of negative symptoms, is consistent with these principles and gives people dignity until the end. However, sitting alongside that is our conviction that trusting in Jesus is the only real way through and out of suffering. True compassion involves pointing people towards Jesus in a loving, gentle way, even at the end of their lives. The Bible tells us that every decision we make will impact others. We are part of a community. We all know the impact on family and friends of suicide. Yet the slogan for voluntary assisted dying is "My life, my death, my choice." As Christians, we believe that we do not rule our own lives. Instead, we trust in the wisdom and mercy of our God, even in the face of suffering. The Bible also tells us clearly that this life is not all there is. Those who trust in Jesus await an eternity free from suffering. So we need not fear death. For those who don't know Jesus, prematurely ending their life is not compassionate, because it robs them of the opportunity to make their peace with God and avoid judgment in the life hereafter. Finally, doctors are pretty good at predicting the course of many illnesses, but they are not God. I've seen many instances of treatment being withdrawn or life support being turned off, and the patient goes on to recover unexpectedly. What a tragedy if the life of such a person was ended prematurely. I thought in this season of COVID I couldn't really get away with not talking about the medical ethics of vaccination and try and address some of the ideas and myths that are out there. Once again, we all have to work hard to try and understand the medical issues. Admittedly, that's not easy at the moment, but we need to talk to the right people, and then we have to think about the biblical perspectives. The Bible tells us that a decision about whether to be vaccinated is not just about our rights. As Christians, we should be availing ourselves of every resource that enables us to continue running the race. And currently, that may mean getting vaccinated against COVID. We should also, more than anyone, be careful not to bring harm to those around us. Do COVID vaccines affect women's fertility? This idea comes from the fact that the vaccine teaches our immune system to fight a spike protein on the surface of the coronavirus. There were some reports that this spike protein is the same as a protein called syncytin-1, which is involved in the growth and the attachment of the placenta during pregnancy. This false report said that getting the COVID vaccine would cause a woman's immune system to attack the placenta and affect fertility. However, it's been shown that the two spike proteins are completely different and distinct. The vaccines have now been used by tens of thousands of pregnant and breastfeeding women worldwide, with no evidence of significant harm to mother or baby. Finally, the stem cell controversy. None of the COVID vaccines currently available contain human cells. The mRNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, are artificially manufactured. This process doesn't use cells at all. The initial cell line that was used to manufacture the spike protein for AstraZeneca vaccines did come from human embryonic kidney cells over 60 years ago. Many of our current vaccines are made using this cell line. No current embryonic cells are used, and there are no human cells in the AstraZeneca vaccine. Embryos are certainly human and deserve respect. They should not be discarded or experimented on. But let's work hard to avail ourselves of the best current advice. So that's a very brief overview of the Christian worldview on medical interventions. There's of course so much more to say, but I hope I've given you the beginning of a framework to start thinking and asking questions. Again, I want to remind us that as Christian women, we need to work hard to understand the world around us. We should not just accept medical technologies available to us because the end justifies the means. We need to consider their use thoughtfully through the lens of the Bible. We need to do this with courage, but also with grace, acknowledging that what is right for us may not always be right for others. Thank you.